Massey University economics professor and Knowledge Exchange Hub director Christoph Schumacher is here to talk tax for this week's Economy Matters column. Thanks for joining us. So does New Zealand have a fair tax system?
Hard to say, actually. There are certainly parts that look at the outside not quite as fair as they could be. But I think the overall idea always is to make a tax system as fair as possible.
Does there need to be some tinkering then?
I think there always needs to be some tinkering, especially with the complexity of a tax system. I mean, I'm not surprised that accountants are as busy as they are because there are so many rules and regulations and that it's very hard to keep up. So it cannot possibly be all good and fair and as efficient as it can be.
What needs to change then?
The current issue, and that's what encouraged me to write the piece, was the outrage over Liz Truss cutting or proposing to cut the top tax rate. And that is a very emotional issue because if you have invested in your education, you work long hours, take on a lot of responsibility, you wonder why on earth should you pay more tax and be penalized for this. But at the same time, if you are on a lower income and work very hard and just struggle to make ends meet, you wonder why the very wealthy shouldn't pay more tax. And then both arguments have merit. So the question is, how do we deal with something that is very emotionally driven, and each party has their point of view, and it's very hard to find sort of a fair solution, especially when there is no clear idea of what fairness actually means, right? Fairness is a subjective concept as such, so how do we turn something that is inherently subjective into something that is objective?
So it's not as simple as, say, taxing the rich even further.
Absolutely not. Especially that's why I wanted to bring some economics into sort of an emotionally driven debate by pointing out that efficiency is the guiding concept of all economic activity. I mean, I tell this my students in every first year lecture and repeat it often enough that let's make the pie as big as possible first to make sure we use our scarce resources in the best possible way. So when New Zealand, for example, many years ago cut the company tax rate, what happened was that companies used those savings, invested it in productive resources, and in the end, the government derived more tax revenue than before. So cutting a top tax rate can actually lead to better economic performance and more money in the pocket.
What about taxing unproductive gains?
Yeah, and this is exactly where I think the system could be improved. On productive taxes, when you actually put in your time and you effectively exchange lifetime for work, I believe that should be taxed at a more equal level because everyone gives up their time in the same times of hours. So, and why should my hour be worth less or more than somebody else's? But the unproductive income, for example, if you own property and you derive rent from it or you've invested in shares, that's not taking up any of your lifetime. That's just money coming in. And I believe this is where we need to impose higher taxes. And it sounds very strange to me that if I go and use my lifetime to work, I get taxed at a higher rate than if I owned an apartment, rented out, do nothing for it, and the income I have gets taxed at a lower rate. That in itself, I think I struggle with.
What lessons can we learn from the recent events in Britain then?
What surprised me initially was that a £45 billion stimulus package gets almost ignored in the media, but the £2 billion cost of cutting the top tax rate suddenly creates an outrage, and it eventually Liz Truss resigned over the whole issue. So I think the lessons learned is that look at the economic implication first. Let's make sure the pie is as big, take some of the emotion out of the tax debate, and then find a system that is actually fair in a sense of reward people for their hard work, but let people pay a bit more for the income they derive where they don't have to put lifetime on the line.
Are there any countries that set the standard for tax?
Not sure. Being German, I know a bit about the German tax system. That has a slightly more a higher tax rate for non-productive assets. It provides initial free tax base so that people with a very low income don't have to initially pay taxes, and it has a very strong social network where a lot of money is given back. Some of the Scandinavian countries are believed to be quite leading in this kind of idea, so maybe look to parts of Europe for some ideas. I mean, it was in Scandinavia that proposed the living salary kind of, where people don't have to actually work but get a base funding so that the necessities can be afforded. Maybe this is something to look at, but there's always room for improvement no matter where you look. And it's good that we bring those issues to the front and maybe stimulate some discussions.
Christoph Schumacher, thanks for your time.
You're most welcome.